Market Musings podcast with Fairbairn and Russell. Well, hello and welcome back to the Market Musings podcast here on Stockbox. It's been a little while since we've done a podcast, but we're very pleased to welcome our guest today. So David Lenigas, who is very well known for all of his ventures in the mining and exploration space, is doing something slightly different with mining as we turn to Vinanz and Bitcoin mining. Of course, Bitcoin being quite a hot topic not so many years ago, come off the boil slightly, but I'm sure David will take us through all the reasons why he feels this the time is right to start this company and grow it in this space. So thank you very much for joining us, David. How are you doing today? Welcome to the podcast.
Mark, I'm all good, and I understand we've got Kenny joining in as well.
Yes, indeed we do. Kenny, how are you?
Yep, I'm all good. All good from a rather cold Scotland. I think you're in a slightly warmer place than me, David. Is it Monaco you're joining us from today?
Yeah. No, if we were on video, I'd swing my computer around and show you the bay. But it's time to spend a few days here because I've been a resident of Monaco for 14 years.
Yes, definitely. I've actually got a sea view myself, but it won't be as pretty as yours. So, no.
No, it's not raining here.
Yeah. Well, it rains all the time in Scotland. We just get used to it. But no, it's great to have you in the podcast. And we talked, before we started the podcast about we believe in people, and you can have the best assets in a business, but if you don't have the right people in a business, then it's never going to succeed.
Well, remember the old saying, location.
Yeah,
that's gone out the door. It's people.
Yeah, 100%.
You can have a really crappy asset with good management, and they can turn something of it. And if the market doesn't like it, they'll find something else that they like, and off it goes.
Yeah, 100%.
It's all about people, and their ability to excite the market and shareholders and come up with some concepts that people find intriguing.
Yeah, and we'll get to that later on, obviously, with the finance, but on the theme of people, what we like to do is sort of take a sort of potted history of David Lenigas. Now, I'm older than Mark, and you're maybe a few years older than me as well, David. But I mean, I obviously remember.
I'm 62 as of last week and feeling every inch of it.
Yeah, well, I'm 51 next week, so I'm not far behind you, and I'm carrying a few extra pounds, maybe like yourself as well. So it's catching up with me.
No, I've started a whole regime today of changing that. I've actually, Tom Winifred sent me a message and said, "Dave, you got to give up smoking." He said, "We fight from opposite sides of the trenches from time to time." He says, "I noticed you got a cough." He says, but I'd already booked it in anyway. So I've gone through the extreme measures of seeing some specialists here to give up smoking and lose weight.
I don't have smoking as a vice, but I certainly have drinking as a vice.
They also gave me some medicine for that as well. So, but I said, well, I have to find new people for dinner parties. I might need to go to Canada. I mean, they're pretty boring people, but no offense to the Canadians that might be listening.
No worries. But yeah, so I mean, what we like to do is for you to maybe take the floor for sort of 10, 15 minutes. Take us back.
I can't talk for that long. You can. I'm good at Q&A.
You're good at Q&A. I'm sure you can give us a potted history. Go back to your childhood, where you were born. What it was like growing up, how you get into this wonderful world of mining exploration and minerals, etc. Take us back. Give us a flavour of how it all started, and then you can tell us about some of your biggest successes. And listen, everybody's got failures. I don't care what.
I got plenty of failures.
Yeah. I mean, Elon Musk's got tons as well, so it happens to the best of us.
Oh, Richard Branson's been bankrupt a few times, I think. But
yeah. Give us a flavour.
That company's gone into administration. Yeah, so everyone wears a badge of honour somewhere in their career. Definitely. No, look. Born 62 years ago. Parents lived in a tiny little town in the middle of South Australia on the edge of the desert called Peruna, which had a population of about 6 people. I was born in Adelaide, so quick drive down to Adelaide. I think it's about a 4-hour drive. mum popped me out, and I ended up growing up for the first 5 or 6 years of my life in this tiny little town on the edge of the wheat belt, where my father was a general store keeper and a rabbit shooter and a kangaroo shooter and everything else, because he ran the general store. And then did a little bit more sort of primary school in South Australia. The old man decided that Queensland was the new frontier, so we moved up to Cairns in the northern part of Queensland. I did a couple of short stints in school up there, and then we sort of settled in Brisbane, where I did the majority of my primary school education and all my high school education. I started university and booked into common first year engineering, which basically means that you look at all the disciplines, and when you split off into the second year, that's when you decide if you want to be electrical, civil, chemical, mining, metallurgical, all the gambits of what engineering are about. And I just started into the second year, and I picked metallurgy, and I thought, I'm going to fail this. So I went and saw the dean and said, look, I really don't know what I'm going to do. I'm thinking about mining engineering. And he goes, look, and I looked at the whole concept of gambit of what can you do at uni and get paid the most amount of money for doing the least amount of work.
Mm-hmm.
There were so many mates at my Brisbane Boys College, graduation year that became doctors and dentists and lawyers, and I could have become some of those. My scores were high enough. And I thought, well, they're going to do like 6, 7, 8 years and I can go become a mining engineer for 3 years, go out the bush and drink beer and fight, become a miner, and make lots of money. So I did. So I went to Kalgoorlie I went to the middle of the Northern Territory to work for Pico Wallsend in the Warrego and Gecko copper mines as a chainman stroke surveyor kid. I was only 18 at the time. And then I did that for a year. And those were the days where the meat workers, the miners and the Aborigines all used to go into the Tennant Creek town on the weekend and beat the absolute living Christ out of each other. In fact, it got so bad they actually shut all the pubs for a month, and the only place you could get a drink was in the country club, and that was restricted membership only. So it was real Wild West country. And then out of the blue, I was bored one day, so I applied for this job at the mines department in Kalgoorlie. I was 18 at the time, and it looked a bit interesting because please come to Kalgoorlie, work for the West Australian government, join the mines department, and we'll pay for you to do your degree part-time. And I thought, well, that sounds pretty easy. So I applied for it in the post and forgot about it. And about 6 months later, I got a phone call from one of the really smart mining guys that I've ever met called Ian Loxton, who was head of the mines department in Kalgoorlie. And he says, remember that job you applied for? He says, you've got it. But he says, and this was on a Wednesday, I think. He says, if you're not here by Sunday, you're not going to get the job. So he's in Western Australia and I'm up in the Northern Territory, and I basically drove non-stop for 4 days through Queensland, through New South Wales, through South Australia, and ended up in Kalgoorlie on Sunday night at 5 o'clock. I rang Ian Locks and said, I'm here. He said, good, you got the job.
That's the easiest interview ever I've heard, David.
Yeah, that was great. And I love Kalgoorlie. 18-year-old, we had plenty of nurses. It was booming. Kalgoorlie was all about underground mines. They hadn't even thought of the concept of open pit mining at that stage. There are about 15 of us in the mines department, senior inspectors, workmen's inspectors, ventilation inspectors, the whole gambit. So, those 8-9 years that I spent there were really, really good fun. And so mines department, study School of Mines. It got to the point that I'd done so many subjects at the School of Mines because it took me so long that I was actually lecturing some subjects while I was still studying there. But anyway, in 1988, I graduated as a mining engineer from the Kalgoorlie School of Mines. But in the graduation, ceremony. I wasn't even there. My wife had to turn up and pick it up because I'd been offered a job in Fiji working for Emperor Gold Mines as a mining engineer. And Emperor was, I think at the time, either when I joined or shortly after I joined, it was so big as a company, it was market capped in the top 50 companies on the entire Australian Stock Exchange. So I moved to Fiji, and within 6 to 12 months, I was basically managing director of the Emperor Gold Mines. We had joint ventures with Western Mining. It was producing a huge amount of gold. We had 2,500 employees. We had lots of operating shafts and open pits. We had big controlling interests in groups all around the world. We had operations in Ecuador, Malaysia, big shareholdings in gold projects in Australia. It was fun.
Yeah. How did that happen, David? Was that just right place, right time? Somebody leaving and you just
what happened was because I graduated so well, which surprised me, from the Kalgoorlie School of Mines. So Jeffrey Reed rang up Odwin Jones and said, "Who's your smartest bright spark?" He said, "Get him on the phone. I'm going to offer him a job that's too good to refuse." So I suppose to that extent, it's a lesson to kids that if you actually do study well and you do well, someone's going to notice.
Hmm. What was the just thinking of mining cycles? Where were we in the cycle around that sort of year 88 in terms of the the sort of typical 7-8 year boom bust cycle? Was it the heyday?
Look, it was gold price was $300 an ounce, but we were making a lot of money.
Okay.
I was with Emperor for nearly 4 years. I ended up being chairman of the Joint Operating Committee of Western Mining. We went through the ups and downs, but we made a lot of money because we had an 11-gram ore body, and 11-gram gold ore bodies don't go broke.
Yeah.
So, and then my time with Emperor came up. I'd had enough, and they say after 3 to 4 years in a place like Fiji, you end up going tropo. If not you, your wife, because they've got a more restricted life. So after 4 years, I said that's enough, and I went back to Western Australia and did a few interesting things. I went back underground mining. I became a very good jumbo operator, machine operator, working shift boss, working foreman. There wasn't a piece of kit that underground that is used then and today that I couldn't operate. And I was pretty damn good at it. I loved it. And we made lots of money. And then what happened then? No, something in between. Then I ended up going to Sydney, and I floated. My first ever company that I floated or helped float was Ghana Gold Mines with Malcolm Turnbull, the people who may recognise Australian politics, ultimately became a prime minister of the country. Not that Malcolm and I get on very well. There's another story there. But I floated Ghana Gold Mines. There was Neville Rand, Malcolm Turnbull, myself, Christian Turner, Alan Doyle. And we started the Konongo Gold Mine in Ghana. From float to first gold pour was 3 months and 1 day. I was really quite proud of that. And we had a good market cap. We raised the money. And, then I did a few more corporate things after that. And then I moved to London-ish about 2003, principally for Cambrian Mining and Asia Energy, and sort of started more about European American business with respect to resources and conglomerates.
Yeah. Asia Energy had quite a meaty market cap from memory. That's kind of around about the time when I saw.
Well, 2005, 2003-4. I remember my office had number 1, 5, and 7 best performing stocks in all of London across all the exchanges. I think Asia Energy was top.
Yep.
That was a phenomenal project, killed by greenies at the end of the day. I'm glad the asset's still there, and I'm glad the guys are still pushing away at it because it is a significant asset for the country of Bangladesh. The sad part, I suppose, for me is we'd gone through all the feasibility study. We'd arranged the banking, $1.5 billion. We had the World Bank, the IFC, the government, the British government involved, and everybody. And then, a couple of do-gooder greenies come through Action Aid and decide they're going to go and spoil the party, and 5 or 6 people end up getting sadly shot by the Bangladesh riflemen trying to stop a protest against the mine. That was quite sad. But, then what? I suppose the biggest thing I've done was when I was asked by the fund managers to come and rebuild Lonro, and that was a lot of fun.
Yep.
That was big.
Yeah.
We raised a lot of money for that. I always remember Colin Ewing, who's now sadly died, and Colin was back in Aura, which is huge project in lithium project in Mexico, which I helped found with him. Colin was working for Blakeney Asset Management. He rings me up and he goes, Dave, he goes, Lonro. I go, yeah. It's dead, isn't it? He says, no. He says, we've got this big fight with J.O. Hambro. Can you come down? We'd like to talk to you. So they said, okay, because all these 2 fund managers were fighting each other. So I said, we'll raise some money. Let's go raise 20, 30, 40, 50 million. I can't remember what the number was. And this was December 2005. And we raised a fair chunk of funds as myself and about 7 big global fund managers, Osprey, JP Morgan, BlackRock, you name it, Capital Group. And the plan was to go and rebuild the brand name of Lonro. So from 2005 to 2012/13, that's what I did, in amongst a whole lot of other smaller things.
Yep.
And when I took over Lonro, it had one hotel in Mozambique called the Hotel Cardozo, and the previous board wanted to sell it for $3 million, but it had an insurance value of $16 million, I recall. And I said, well, I'm not selling it. We're going to start our own hotel brand. We probably raised 500-600 million pounds around the world, mainly institutional, and we built Lonro into a huge conglomerate. 5 different business sectors. 23,000 direct and indirect employees in 23 countries. Started Fastjet in Africa with Stelios, which I was really proud of. Unfortunately, eventually, with oil prices and you name it, and African governments being what they are, sadly, it didn't probably make it past year 7 or something. But it did have a huge impact on the way people travelled in East Africa.
Yep. And what was your role there at Lonro?
Well, I was the executive chairman. I was the King Canute. I was in charge of everything.
Well, that's a great success story. You not feel like
and with that, I said to all my team, I said, if I'm the executive chairman and I'm the guy who raises the money, the buck stops with me. The fund managers don't give you the money. They give it to me to spend, right? So if I'm executive chair of Lonro, then I'm the chairman and the boss of every subsidiary. And I remember there was a stint there in the newspapers. Oh, Lenigas is, he's got 154 directorships. That was the headline. What they never bothered to tell the market was that 147 odd of those were all Lonro related.
Mm-hmm.
But no, there's no headline in that. And I remember having an argument with some of the press on that. But, they didn't care. It was all daggers out for Lenigas, because he's a success. Or Lonro was turning into a success.
Indeed. Why did you end up leaving?
I think it got taken over.
Taken over.
It was bought out. Okay.
We built it to the point that someone wanted to buy it.
Okay.
154 years of London Stock Exchange listed history gone to the Swiss and the Germans. And good luck to them. That's what public markets are for.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I helped in the early days with Asia Energy. I helped in the early days Western Canadian Coal. I mean, one of the reasons I came across to London was to help Johnny Burns and Joe Malins with Cambrian Mining, which was on its knees. It was on OFX at the time, completely broke. Bruce Rowan decided to put some money in, bless Bruce, right? And Offex turned into AIM, and I remember going to Canada and the guys were stuffed. I was there the day that Mitsui said we're pulling out. The stock share price was 2 cents, Western Canadian Coal. And I said, this is how we fix this. And I helped them raise some money for all of the divisions within like 3 or 4 months, 5 or 6 divisions. And Western Canadian Coal turned from an underground metallurgical coking coal concept to an open pit, some of the highest grade metallurgical coal in the world in British Columbia, and it got taken out for $4.3 billion. And all the Cambrian mining shareholders made a fortune. Lonro got taken out. In the middle of all this, I was also chairman of a company called BDI Mining, which I took off Canada, much to the Ontario Securities Commission's disgust. You can't take a company off Canada. And I said, well, I'm dual listed in London and I don't like your regulations. Goodbye. We're going to sue you. I said, fine, sue me. So BDI Mining was, migrated wholly and solely across to London. I think it was 2 or 3 cents when I first got involved. Paul Loudon, who now lives in Australia, sort of was involved as well, did very, very well and good help on it. And we ended up being taken out by Clifford Elphick for cash for 38p a share. He wanted the Cempaka diamond mine in Indonesia. Mm-hmm. Good on him. So, I've had quite a lot of corporate successes. Mm-hmm. You also get a few that you're sort of not quite too proud of either.
Yeah, well, give us a flavour of one of them, David, because obviously, I don't care what anyone says. You have failures in life, and that's when the most valuable lessons are learned.
My biggest recent regret was being convinced to join NQ Minerals, which was Aquis. In the last few years, some people really wanted out of that. I liked the Helier operations in Tasmania. I helped it turn into a profit. The problem with that whole business was the corporate debt that had been built up by way of a bond was never going to get paid off. And I had the sad job of putting that company into administration. And that's the first company with probably close to 200 that I've done corporately around the world that I've had the sad dishonour of putting into administration to protect the creditors.
Yeah.
And I had good legal advice on that. And when you go from switching shareholder to look after shareholders to now switching over to creditors, it's a pretty sad thing. Yeah. And the saddest part about it was all of the divisions were making money. Just the top co was broke.
Yep. And
the way that the management had structured it, all the previous way money moved, we could never get any money to the top co to pay anybody. Yep. So that was a big regret.
Yeah.
But I was very pleased that I helped get Helier from running at a loss to running at a big profit. And, and we had, we restructured the financing for $55 million with ING. And one of the things that we couldn't tell the market as I was putting it into administration a couple of years ago was we had a firm offer on the table from an absolutely globally monstrous fund manager starting with B, I can't mention their name, for $80 million US, firm, provided the bondholders restructured the debt, and the bondholders refused to. That would have restructured the company in a heartbeat. Yep. All right, you're not allowed to tell the market that.
So how did that affect your mindset going forward? Did you approach your next couple of businesses differently, or was it just took a deep breath?
It didn't really. It was post-COVID, really. So I did nothing in COVID. I went farming. So I was looking for something to do anyway.
Yeah.
So it's not like I had anything else. I had a few other little odds and sods that I was working on. So it's not like it really affected my reputation that much. It just sort of more knocked me for six a bit that I couldn't rescue it. I was brought in to try and rescue it. I rescued the operations, but I couldn't rescue the top co. And I suppose for someone like me that prides in fixing things that are bust, and that's probably how I've made my career, it's one that I couldn't fix because just the size of the debt at $110 million US was just too much.
Yeah.
What's my biggest personal regret leaving money on the table? I formed a company with Jeremy Edelman, who's on the board of Vinanz.
Mm-hmm.
It was Jeremy and I that said, let's go do Bitcoin different to Argo, right? And we formed a company called Lenigas Cuba because we like doing things that are a bit out there. And we listed it on Aquis. And we raised a couple of million. And we were the only public company in the world actively investing in Cuba. It was really interesting. We had great support quietly from the British government. We had great support from parts of the US government, even though it's the US that caused all the sanctions. You know, we were working with Carlos Gutierrez and Madeleine Albright's team for years. And we were making a real impact into certain divisions within investment within Cuba. And then when Trump won, literally within 48 hours, we were told by governments to be, look, if you want your bank accounts frozen forever, stay here, or otherwise sell everything and show us that you've made no money. So we held a board meeting, and literally the next day we announced we were selling all of our assets for $1. We had to demonstrate to the US and the British government that we were making no money. So we're sitting there scratching our head and going, right, what are we going to do now? And as part of that process, we had to dual list in Canada because Canada was also Cuba investment friendly. Biggest investor in Cuba is actually Canadians, right? So we're going, right, what are we going to do now? You can't just have a company that's got nothing. So we said, we're going to go into the weed business. And it went really well for a while. And I remember this stock, it literally took off from 2 to 3p a share to $1 plus over a 6 to 8 month period. And it was turning over 20 to 30 to $40 million a day in turnover. The guys in London who took Lenigas Cuba originally couldn't sell their stock in the early days. And the screaming was horrible. I bought this stock at 3. I can't even get rid of it at 2. Pershings have locked my account up, so I can't trade this stuff. This thing's a bag of rubbish, right?
Yep.
So a lot of people were stuck in Lenigas Cuba, which became LGC Capital, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And eventually when it all became unlocked, guys who were stuck at 2 or 3p were happily selling at 40, 50, 60, 70, 80. Some of my mates in Australia who came in on the original IPO were selling at over $1 a share. They made 8, 9, 10, $12 million each. So that was but from my perspective, because I was chairman, I was locked in. Not only locked in physically, so only about a quarter of my stock was loose, but as an English sort of orientated player, if the management sells out, there must be something wrong with the company, right? Whereas Bruce, who started Canopy in Canada, one of the largest weed companies in North America, sells $400 million worth of Canopy stock, and everyone says, oh, he's an entrepreneur. He's a hero. He's taken some money off the table. So when the whole cycle ended up disappearing in cannabis, if I was like my Canadian co-directors, I would have banked close to $100 million. And then I wouldn't have ever had to work.
Yeah,
there's definitely. And I thought, I'm not going to sell because that's not the way I'm made.
Yeah, there's definitely a flaw in the system, though. I think that puts a lot of.
Well, it's not a flaw in the system. It's a flaw in the concept that America and Canada buy the dream and the rest of the world buys the reality.
Yeah, maybe that's a better way of putting it.
Okay, so if the senior management's dumping their stock, look what happened with Rod McElroy at Blue Jay. Rod goes and sells $3 million at Blue Jay at 14p, and then all of a sudden the fund managers try and get rid of him, and they did.
Yeah, I think that
he's got mouths to feed and families to feed and kids to put through school.
You're just investors like everybody else. So I mean, I think You look at somebody like...
and no one ever said, geez, Dave, thanks for not selling while I was happily piling out of your stock at $1 a share that you told me to put in at 3p, right?
Yeah.
No one ever thanks you.
Yeah, the only way to do it nowadays is basically resign as a director and then sell your stock. I mean, Gervais Edel done that Great and Gold, obviously taking the company as far as it could go, you know. And
hey, look, I love Gervais. What Gervais did with Great and Gold was, I remember sitting down with Ali Clayton at lunch, our favourite Chinese restaurant, the Golden Dragon in Chinatown, and Ali says, "Have you seen that drill hole result from Greatland Gold near Telfer?" Bang. And I rang my team in Australia and said, "What ground's around it?" And by Monday morning, we'd pegged all the ground around it. And I bought a lot of his stock on the market because it took a while for people to understand. No, we're going to see Newcrest being taken over by Newmont, right?
Yep.
That's going to happen in my view. Newmont on Telfer, here's my call, 95%, sometime within the next year to 2 years, Greatland Gold will own Newcrest and all of Havieron. Because Greatland's now backed by Twiggy Forrest, and Twiggy Forrest is the richest man in Australia. And that's where I think our whole corporate game's going. And Gervais set it all up beautifully. Well done to him.
Yeah, no, he done it. Well, I'm not saying he done it the right way. He done it the way, and he never gets slated for selling his shares once he resigned from the board. You know, people are, congratulations.
But in America, look, Elon Musk will go and sell them and say, "I've got a tax bill to pay. Quick, go sell 300 million shares." Or you've just been found guilty from the SEC for spruiking your stock, saying that the Kuwait or the Saudi investors are going to buy Tesla at $420 when your stock's $380, right? Or you're a very naughty boy, you get a $20 million fine and Tesla gets a $20 million fine. And that's it. None of you go to jail.
Yeah.
Right? Elon said, I love Elon. I think he's the smartest guy in the world corporately and probably technically. What he's doing with Starlink just blows the world apart.
Mm.
But, I've got a tax bill to pay. I need to sell 300 million. Oof, all gets swallowed up in 30 nanoseconds. And then the share price goes up.
Yeah, it's a crazy old world. So we've kind of came full circle. We've almost kind of come up to date with the various companies you've started or rescued and then been taken over at various different points.
Well, there's a lot more than that. But that's just that's just sort of the half hour highlights.
Yeah. I can remember quite a lot, so I can. But we'll maybe save that for another podcast. But so we went from commodity mining, and now we're into Bitcoin mining. So where did the idea for Vinanz come from?
I was sitting with Jeremy, right? So Jeremy was the guy I sat with. In the old days, 2003, 2004, Jeremy moved into my office. Lawyer, at that time he had no girlfriend, no wife, no furniture, no car, no job. He was sitting in London. And we did Altona and Braymore together that year. And they were one of the great two big successes of the London Stock Exchange listings for that following year. And Jeremy and I did LGC Capital, which turned out to be that, multi-$100 million, Cuba cannabis story. And I was sitting down with Jeremy talking about Bitcoin mining and the fact that fiat currency and the world banks and the central banks are really got a problem coming. And I said, look at this Argo blockchain. It's ridden the curve. It's been up. It's dual listed in America. Bitcoin's where it's at. Jeremy's a lawyer. He's also an ex-merchant banker. And I said, how do we create a company that operates in a safer business model of mining Bitcoin than Argo blockchain? And if we can work that out, we need to list it. Mm-hmm. And we looked at Argo, and God bless their cotton socks. They had a vision. They've done well. They made a lot of money. Okay, debt blew them up, right? But their model was Texas, get big, build data centers, and data centers are worth a lot of money, right?
Yep.
The problem is interest rates went the wrong way, and so did fuel prices and electricity prices. And they end up having to sell out their prime jewels, which is data center infrastructure and employees, to debt funds. And now they're struggling.
Mhm.
And we came up with a model and said, okay, we don't want to own infrastructure. We don't want to have 250 people building a giga centre. We don't want to have 25 people on the books that you've got to feed every month. And it's your responsibility to make sure that they're fed because they've got to pay the mortgages. How do we do this? And we said, okay, look, Valerium's just bought these miners in Nebraska. And it was weird. And he said, okay, let's list this as an operating company. So, Richard, you want to close the GSX, which he will do. And I'm a big shareholder in that whole Valerium GSX. He said, but you can't own the GSX and be a Bitcoin miner. So we'll buy them off you and we'll list it as an operating company. And okay, it's not a lot of revenue, but it proved the model, right? Mm-hmm. It's all about the model, because once you expand a model that works, you can get really big. It was like the Lonro model, right? Yep. So Richard agreed to sell us the miners at book value. Okay, argument today is we probably overpaid, but it got us the short circuit route. So we started with 20 miners in Nebraska. We looked at raising money at the end of last year. Last year was tragic for raising money. We went to a couple of brokers, and I don't want to mention names on this. Yeah, we like it, couldn't raise money. Yeah, we like it, couldn't raise money. At the end of last year, no one was raising money on anything. And then out of the blue, I get this call from Nick Josh at Clear Capital. I go, hi, Nick, because Nick was at Pello. He said, what do you got? We got money here to invest in. LSE, AIM. I said, well, I've got nothing really, but what about Aquis? Nah, I hate Aquis. I said, yeah, that's what most people say. I said, well, we're going to list a Bitcoin mining company like a mini Argo and try and make it bigger than they ever would have dreamed of. Oh, we like Argo because at Pello, we funded Argo at 3, 5 and 8p. We understand Bitcoin. How much do you want? I said, 800 grand. He said, we'll raise it. So I rang up Jeremy. I said, from something that was going very slow is now going very fast. And full credit to Bob Roberts and Nick Josh and the 20 or 30 guys in the Clear team. They raised it. So it's game on.
Yep. I mean, the thing I like about Aquis, and I'm probably going against the herd here, is that you can get a perfect storm in Aquis, especially if the company's dual listed in OTC.
Okay, so let's talk about the OTC stuff, right? So we've been, and there's no secret, and I'm not telling you any insider information. It was always going to be get on Aquis and then get a dual listing on the OTC. Well, actually, it's not called a dual listing. You have a dual trading platform, to be technically correct, right? Brian Stockbridge at First Sentinel says, I'm the first sponsor for OTC markets outside the US. So not only will we be your advisor for Aquis, but we'll also help you get on the OTC. Okay, that's valuable. So in the last couple of days, I've been on the phone to OTC markets, Brian Stockbridge at First Sentinel, other lawyers, market makers in the States, and I reckon in the next day or two, we'll be pushing the button. Now, OTC reckon it's somewhere between 8 and 10 weeks to get a full up and going with full market maker spread. And in the US, you go DTC and OTC, so all the E-Trades and Charles Schwab's can trade you, the whole lot.
Yeah.
And then we're going to open the whole market up. And then I think those people who are buying Vinanz now in quite a thin market, right, are going to be very surprised at the horsepower that comes in from the United States.
Yeah, because it drains the swamp, doesn't it? The OTC basically takes the shares from the pool in the UK.
It's proper arbitrage stuff.
Yeah, it's quite a
the other thing that people aren't aware of who are listening to this podcast is every share was taken down by Clear Capital people, with the exception of 50 or 60,000 pounds from 4 market makers. So the only liquidity in this stock right now, as I can work it out, is probably the market makers selling out some of their principal IPO position. And as Bob Roberts and Nick Josh say, Dave, no one in here is selling. So once we clean out that market maker stock, and we will fight tooth and nail to get on the OTC and the DTC in the US within the next 8 to 10 weeks, effective from tomorrow. And we've even said to OTC and our advisors, we've got the ticker symbol in London, BTC. I mean, that's priceless.
Yeah.
But we want BTCLF on the OTCQB.
I'm trying to think, what does LF
And
stand for?
and our senior technical guys are all based in North America. They're all mathematicians. They're all geeks, right? And where are we deploying our Bitcoin miner clusters? All over North America. So this is an American story, growth story, but we just happen to be listed here because that's where regulation allowed us to do it just now.
Yep.
Now, at some point, the FCA is going to say, okay, we now understand crypto, we understand Bitcoin, and the mood is starting to change. There is a real argument in our minds at Vinanz that give us a year of growth with our business model, we can quite comfortably put our hand on our heart and go to the FCA and say, we would like to move up, potentially up to the LSE. Potentially. But if our real market is America and Canada, from a trading perspective, Aquis is a beautiful market for us. Fully compliant, fully reporting.
Yeah, no, there's definitely perfect storm opportunities in Aquis. I mean, I've experienced a few of them myself.
And then we're also looking at Euronext. And Euronext is even bigger than all of the London market put together. Because tech is out of Paris. And every institution in the world can trade Euronext online. And the nice thing about Bitcoin mining is it mines coins while you're awake and while you're asleep. It's like being so rich as a multi-billionaire that they live off the interest of the interest, and they're even making money off the interest of the interest while they're asleep. The nice thing about Bitcoin mining is it mines 24/7.
Yeah. I mean, obviously there's an energy cost to this as well. I mean, I think.
Yeah, but you're going to see energy prices come off.
Yeah. But you've specifically targeted green energy for your.
At the moment, it's green energy, but as we find, in other places within the States, like oil-driven economies and stuff, Texas, whatever, wherever the energy price, because these units suck, 3.5 kilowatts each, so 100 Bitcoin miners is 350 kilowatts. That's a hell of a lot of juice, right?
Yeah.
Whoever offers me a 3-year contract at the cheapest price per kilowatt hour on a 3-year locked-in contract, they get the attention of my business.
Yep.
Absolutely, because it's all about operating costs. Now, those guys who are deploying miners, in the peak of the energy boom and inflation, 4 or 5 months ago or 6 months ago. So here's for instance, right? So the Bitcoin miners that Valerian bought, and we bought well back then because I helped them buy them, was $10,500 a miner. And we bought 20 of them. We installed them in Nebraska, right?
Mm-hmm.
A faster, more modern, like off-the-shelf today from Hong Kong unit, 80 terahash then to 104 terahash now, has dropped to $1,350. I like the fact the Bitcoin price has fallen, because if it falls anymore, I'll buy even more units, even cheaper. And then my operating cost goes down to sub $10,000 a coin.
Yep, that was my next question.
What I don't want is to see the Bitcoin price go 30, 40, 50, because then all of a sudden there's no Bitcoin miners around anymore. When Valerian bought their 20 Bitcoin miners for Nebraska, the wait time was 6 months. The wait time now is because there's so much stock of the latest high-tech kit. It's the time to wrap it in a box, put the tracking label on it and the shipping label and the customs form and put it on a plane.
Yep. So let's say, for instance, you recently purchased another 100 of these miners, and I think they get installed in Labrador.
Yeah, no, they arrive in Labrador. We announced that this morning. They arrive in Labrador on Thursday next week. they'll probably have them spinning by the weekend. As soon as they're in, we'll be ordering another 100 Bitcoin miners. Now, where we put them, whether it's Manitoba, Quebec, British Columbia, Wyoming, Texas, that's what our technical mathematicians are working out at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they're installed, we'll stick in another 100 miners. Maybe it's 200 the next time. Right?
Yep. So answer this question, David.
Yeah.
So you talked about energy costs. So these 100 Bitcoin miners, say for instance, year down the line, Texas say, David, bring your Bitcoin miners over here. We'll give you energy costs 33% cheaper. You can physically just take your miners and relocate them whatever the energy costs.
We can do that, yeah.
Yeah. That's
the miners
the beauty.
You can go send your technical people around, pull them out of the rack, take them, put them somewhere else.
Yeah.
Because the asset is the miner with the serial number.
Yeah. And obviously, if you had a data center, you would be stuck in that location, whereas you've got a portable Bitcoin.
We've got and that's the real model that we're working on here, right? Because let's just say we wake up in 6 months' time. Biden is already talking about putting a 30% electricity tax on Bitcoin miners in the United States. That came public last week. So if I've got Bitcoin miners in America, that Biden's now going to up my energy costs by 33%, I'll just go down and pull them out of the racks and take them to Canada.
Yep, no, makes sense. No, it's an interesting model.
It gives me the flexibility that kit's mine, and a data center is just housing my computing processing power. And for that, I pay them somewhere between $160 and $180 a month per machine. Mm. And that's it. And for that, they supply me power, technicians, repair it when it's down, program it so it goes into my wallet. Perfect. We can run the whole company with 3 directors and a mathematician.
Yeah. And obviously, you don't need a bit all singing, dancing office and, multiple offices. It's a very compact business model. I mean, overheads will be...
I said to Jeremy, if we think of being stupid enough to even get a Regis office, shoot me.
Yeah. It's a bit like these big Canadian royalty companies that are, it's about 7 guys running these multi-billion royalty companies out of garage because they don't need, this infrastructure to run these royalty companies.
That's it. It's all about, and Jeremy being an ex-lawyer and a very senior merchant banker, I mean, what he doesn't know about banking and putting in banking facilities and legal agreements, I mean, it's just phenomenal. Then we've got Mahesh, who runs all the accounts out of Singapore with his team, who's well experienced with his team on AIM and Aquis and LSE companies. And we've got 2 dudes who are absolute gee whizzes mathematicians who manage all of the processes on where we should put these things next. And one of the things that we can look at as we grow, Mark asked me earlier in an interview, how many miners do you want to install by the end of this year and next year? The real answer is I would like 5, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50,000 miners if I could get there. But, I don't want to dilute what is a very good structure. I mean, there's only 120 million shares on issue. The free float's 21 million shares, and Clear Capital have all of them in their clients, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't want to dilute the structure, but things are getting a bit desperate out there with these data centers and suppliers now that they're even offering very good terms for leveraged finance. So we could potentially grow quite big with leverage. The issue is, could that blow you up?
Well, I'm sure.
Because debt kills. But then if you look at really big businesses, every big business has some degree of debt. Right now we have no debt, we're making money.
Mm-hmm. No, it's certainly an interesting modelling concept, and I'm keen to see how it progresses. Mark, sorry, I've been talking a lot here. I hope you're still there.
I'm still here. Oh yeah, I'm still here, just listening away. Yeah.
Yeah. Anything you want to jump in, and I'll take a break.
Yeah. Well, I think you've sort of covered everything. I mean, I'm just sort of perhaps interested, David, we kind of touched on it before about your switch from physical mining to mining Bitcoin. But I mean,
I'm still doing the physical stuff. I mean, I'm doing rare earths and lithium in Australia.
Oh, yeah, you're still involved. Yes, you are still involved in doing some things. I think with Corcell PLC as well, aren't you doing some things with them?
No, I just sold them some assets.
Okay.
One of my companies has bought back into one of their sort of rare earths.
Okay.
But I can't make any comment on that because I'm an insider information.
Indeed. But
so
I mean,
the other side, yeah.
At some point, generally people sort of want to wind down a little bit and, sort of make their money and sort of semi-retire. But you've formed this new company. What was your real driver for doing it? I mean, do you really feel an opportunity here?
No, mortgage. Needs must. Just like most people in this world.
Oh, right. Okay. Mortgage.
Everybody thinks I'm as rich as shit, right? Use the French. We've all got mortgages. I mean, I've got 3 wives, 4 kids.
Okay.
Like an English cricket score at lunch on the first day, right? 3 for 4. Very great relationships with all of my families. This wife, we've just been through our 15th wedding anniversary. But everything's always a challenge. And, we have mortgages like everybody else. Okay. And under the new British banking rules, show me your fixed verifiable income.
Yeah.
And with COVID, like a lot of people, I did nothing. I went farming. There was no work for someone like me. You couldn't get on a plane. You couldn't go visit bankers. And I'm sitting there at the end of COVID going, Jesus, I'm bored. And I've got to roll my mortgages over and I have no verifiable income. Okay. I don't care if you're asset rich. You got 10, 15 million pounds worth of property. But no one thinks about the 5 to 6 million pounds worth of mortgages you got. And under the new British rules, prove to me that you've got the income because the property's in the UK, right? Justify that mortgage, right? So it needs must. So a couple of big broker mates of mine rang me up from Australia and said, come and run a couple of things over here. I said, perfect. Now I'm getting busy. But Jeremy and I have been working on finance for a while. And the other reason I joined Penn Petro, which is oil and gas, America, and hopefully farming into the Horse Hill well if poor old Steve Standerson can sort the Mendy's and the Greenies, is, and I think he will, he's done very well to date, is its main board. And I like main board. I like the governance of main board. I like the street cred globally of LSE. Aquis is still learning and growing. But, I remember when OFX turned into AIM, and AIM became globally a huge market. Aquis is going through the growing pains, but it will get there.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Right now, I'm on the board of 3 ASX companies, Tier 1 stock exchange, London Stock Exchange, Tier 1 stock exchange, and an Aquis company. But to be absolutely truthful, needs must.
Okay.
I needed to bolt together enough income to go to the bank. There you go. Don't take away my wife's house.
Right. So it's very important. So it's important for you that it's a success because of a needs must, as well as, of course, wanting to grow a company and deliver returns for shareholders.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm not like Frankie Timmis living in Switzerland with billions in the bank, but my news goes. But
yeah, you would be bored.
And I'm too young to retire. I'm 62. I've got a lot to contribute.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very good at raising money for the right deals. And if I really look back at my life in the last 20 years, what am I good at? I'm not necessarily good at resources, or starting an airline with Stelios, or running a Bitcoin mine, or running an oil and gas company, or hitting the Gatwick gusher, which is a very proud moment of mine. We can talk about that in another podcast, right? I'm really proud of the fact that my specialty has been raising money.
Okay.
I mean, I added it up a few years ago. With all the money that the companies that I've been involved with in the last 20 years, I reckon it's well over £1 billion, maybe even close to £1.5 billion from institutions mainly for companies all over Canada, North America and London. And unless you have capital, you can't grow. And I think I'm good at running a widget company. And the widget is oil, gas, airlines, agriculture, Bitcoin. It's just a widget. And provided the widget sits in a properly structured company, you can raise money. And it comes back to what we originally said at the beginning. It's not about location anymore. It's about people. If you've got a company with access to money, you can grow it. If the market doesn't like the piece of rubbish you've got in it, you go buy something else that they do like. And then you can go raise some more money and make it bigger. And that's what I think has become my specialty.
Okay.
Because even in a shitty market, I can still raise money.
Okay.
And there are people walking around London with their pockets hanging out because they can't raise a cent.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty grim out there, so it is.
Right. So is that enough for you guys?
I think so. Yeah.
You can shoot me as I walk down the street.
No, I mean, I think that's a very good background into your background and how it transitioned into, what you're doing. But I think you finished it off nicely there with your sort of a bit about raising money and how important that is, and if that's your specialty. I mean, the only final thing I'd want to kind of add is, where do you feel the general crypto space is going to go in the future? I presume you think it's going to do pretty well, considering you've just started a new venture.
It's gone too far to turn back.
Yeah.
20 to 25% Americans now own crypto.
Okay.
70% of Canadians own crypto.
70. Wow.
Yeah. My wife's got crypto, my kids have got crypto.
Forget about the numbers in Asia.
Yep.
Everyone's got that back up. Why is gold going up? Finally. Everybody says the central banks. What is the US dollar? What is the British pound? Remember, all it is a promissory note. There's no fundamental backing anymore. And don't get me wrong, I'm a big globalist. It's all about no chaos. The banks have got to be the US dollar, the yen, because without that, you have anarchy, right? But in the old days, currencies used to be backed by something.
Mm.
Now currencies are just a promissory note. Don't worry, we'll get it back to you. America's now pushing 31 trillion. I remember going to New York when I was raising money for Lonro. I used to love going to New York. And between downtown and Wall Street was this building you drove past. I can't remember what street. And it had this huge ticker number and numbers going around fast as you can see. And at that stage, it was $17 trillion. That was America's live debt by the second, right? British debt's now up to a couple of trillion. All banks all governments is now just a promissory note with no real fundamental backing. Bitcoin is the concept of just the same, but it's not controlled by regulation.
Yep.
And every transaction is through the world's best ledger. And even governments acknowledge that the blockchain is uncorruptible. And guess who's the biggest holder of Bitcoin? You'd be really surprised.
The Federal Reserve?
US Federal Reserve is the largest holder of Bitcoin in the world. Because they've confiscated it from all those people that were nicking stuff, all the Dodge guys, right?
Well, they confiscated the gold, didn't they, when they needed it?
Absolutely. It's gone too far. Now, the world needs a mix. You need stability, you need central banks, you need the fact that, trust in one God, the United States of America, Britain's, blue chip philosophy of the world, the fact that China, no one really quite knows where they're going, but, they're going to win the economic war, not the violent one, and they're doing a pretty good job at it. And Japan will always be up there.
Mm.
So it has a place. Things like Dogecoin and ETH. ETH is very important because that is the blockchain, right? So, and it sort of links a little bit to Bitcoin. But the only true cryptocurrency, and there will be derivatives of it as it go by, will all ultimately boil down to BTC.
Well, I think we can leave it there. Thank you very much. We're just up on an hour, so thank you very much, David. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Split that one into two. All right.
Perfect. No, it was great having you on, David. Appreciate your time.
All right, cool. You're going to stop recording?
Thank you, David. Yeah, we can stop. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Cheers. Thank you for listening to another podcast from Market Musings with Ben and Russell. Tune in next time.